She was called the Blood Countess, and with good reason. According to legend, Countess Elizabeth Báthory slaughtered hundreds of young women, some say over 600, and bathed in their virginal blood to preserve her youth. A noblewoman turned serial killer, her name has become synonymous with sadistic evil. But who was Elizabeth Báthory, really? Did she truly bathe in blood, or have the lines between history and myth been blurred by time? This is the dark, mysterious tale of the Blood Countess, a story drenched in blood and intrigue, where fact and legend intertwine. Evening view of the ruins of Chaktich Castle, Bathory's notorious home and later prison. The castle's walls have long since crumbled, but the legends of what happened here still chill the bone. Within these cold halls, a countess allegedly committed unspeakable atrocities that would earn her a place in history's nightmares. It was here that the Blood Countess ruled, and it was here that her dark reign would finally come to an end. Elizabeth Báthory was born in 1560 to one of the most powerful families in Hungary. From birth, she had noble blood, wealth, and privilege. Her relatives included kings and knights, but darkness haunted her youth. As a child, Elizabeth reportedly suffered epileptic fits and wild mood swings. She also witnessed brutality early. At the age of 6, she watched a public execution, a gruesome spectacle that was commonplace in her time. Violence was woven into the fabric of daily life for the young countess. Her family's influence was matched only by its eccentricity and cruelty. One uncle was said to practice Satanism, while an aunt taught young Elizabeth the ways of sadomasochism and witchcraft. Growing up in this environment, the impressionable countess learned that torture and cruelty could be tools of power. At just 15, she was married off to Count Ferenc Nadasdy, a renowned soldier from another mighty family. Nadasdy was celebrated in war, but at home he was as ruthless as they come. To please his new bride, Ferenc reportedly built a torture chamber in their castle at Chaktich, crafted to her gruesome specifications. He even schooled Elizabeth in sadistic practices. One story tells of Nadasdy having a servant girl smeared in honey and left outside for insects to devour, a twisted gift to amuse his wife. He also presented Elizabeth with a special pair of gloves lined with claws so she could scratch and flay the skin of servants who displeased her. In these early years of marriage, the seeds of the Blood Countess's cruelty were sown. Despite her aristocratic life, Elizabeth's mind veered toward darkness. Surrounded by violence and rumored occult practices, she began to indulge her sadistic impulses. It is said that her husband's presence initially kept her worst excesses in check. But after Count Nadasdy's death in 1604, any restraint was gone, and Elizabeth Báthory's reign of terror was about to fully begin. Little did anyone know the horrors to come would make her early cruelty seem tame by comparison. With her husband dead and her power unchecked, Countess Bathory turned her attention fully to the young girls of her domain. The countess owned vast estates and castles, and she often lured peasant girls from nearby villages to work in her castle as servants, or so they thought. Once behind the castle's closed doors, these girls found themselves trapped in a nightmare. Bathory's servants, and allegedly the countess herself, subjected them to sadistic torture that sounds like something out of a horror novel. Except these events were documented in witness testimonies. What kinds of atrocities earned Elizabeth her bloody reputation? The list is long and ghastly. According to reports, she jammed pins and needles under the fingernails of girls who displeased her. She would have her victims stripped, tied down, then smeared with honey and left for hours or days to be attacked by swarms of bees and ants. Bathory didn't stop at psychological torment either. She delighted in purely physical cruelty. She is said to have stabbed and sliced at her victims, burned them with hot irons, even biting chunks of flesh from their bodies in frenzied outbursts. Some were beaten or whipped to death, others locked outside in the snow until they froze. In one especially macabre incident, a girl was reportedly forced to cook and eat her own sliced-off flesh before being killed. These are not just lurid legends, they come from witness testimonies and servant confessions that spread the fear of Bathory's cruelty. Through it all, a terrifying rumor began to take shape, that Elizabeth Báthory was obsessed with blood. Servants whispered that she believed blood held the secret to youth and beauty. According to later legend, the Countess even bathed in the blood of virgins she had murdered, thinking it would keep her skin forever young. Imagine the scene. A dim candlelit chamber, a bathing tub stained red, the Countess emerging with blood on her skin. A Gothic tableau almost too horrific to believe. Did this really happen? We cannot be certain. The bloodbath tale may be exaggerated folklore, but the very fact that contemporaries believed it possible shows how gruesome her reputation had become. For years, no one dared stop Elizabeth Báthory. How could such evil go unchecked? The uncomfortable truth is that she was a powerful noble in a time when common folk had few rights. Her victims were mostly peasants, poor girls, whose lives were sadly seen as expendable by the aristocracy. Local authorities largely turned a blind eye. After all, killing serfs and servants was gauche but not really illegal for a noble, as one historian dryly noted. Families in the countryside grew terrified. It's said that villagers hid their daughters to keep them out of the Countess's clutches. Yet the horror continued behind castle walls, and the Blood Countess grew bolder. Driven by bloodlust or perhaps the need to find new victims, she began to reach beyond the peasantry. That would be her fatal mistake. Bathory's dark secrets were about to catch up with her. By 1609, rumors of disappearing girls and gruesome atrocities could no longer be ignored, especially as whispers hinted that even young noblewomen had begun to vanish after visiting Bathory's castle. The Hungarian king, Matthias II, finally took notice when members of the minor gentry came forward with accusations. He could tolerate scandalous rumors no longer. A high-born killer in his kingdom was bad for order, and some say he had his own motives, which we'll get to. Matthias II ordered an urgent investigation into Countess Bathory's activities. The task fell to György Thurzó, the Count Palatine of Hungary, effectively the king's chief investigator and a relative of Bathory. In late 1610, Thurzó arrived at Choctich Castle with a contingent of soldiers determined to catch Elizabeth Báthory in the act. What they found sounds like the climax of a horror film. According to Thurzó's men, they entered the castle to discover a scene of living nightmare. One girl dead on the premises, another girl dying from torture, and still others chained and wounded, whimpering for mercy. In the middle of this horror stood Countess Bathory herself, allegedly caught red-handed in the midst of torture. One can only imagine the shock even hardened soldiers felt at the blood-soaked spectacle before them. The Blood Countess's reign of terror had finally been exposed to the light. Elizabeth Báthory was arrested on the spot, along with several of her faithful servants who had assisted in her crimes. Early in 1611, a trial was convened, not for Bathory, whose noble status complicated matters, but for her accomplices. Dozens of witnesses from around the region gave sworn statements, recounting the ghastly abuse inflicted at the castle. In the end, 3 of Bathory's closest servants, 2 women and 1 man, were convicted of heinous crimes of torture and murder. Their punishment was brutal and swift. After a brief trial in January 1611, they were executed, burned alive for their role in the atrocities, their fingers ripped off with hot pincers before execution, according to accounts of the sentencing, a common punishment for witchcraft and murder at the time. A 4th accomplice, less implicated, was sentenced to imprisonment. Justice for the hundreds of victims was harsh. But what of the Countess herself? Elizabeth Báthory, thanks to her aristocratic rank, was never formally tried in court. Executing a member of one of the most powerful families in Hungary was politically delicate. Instead, a different fate was devised. In 1611, the authorities ordered that the Blood Countess be permanently confined in her own castle. Bathory was literally bricked inside a set of rooms in Choctich Castle, with only small openings left to pass food and air. In these cramped, lightless quarters, the woman whose life had been drenched in blood would spend her final years utterly alone. No more girls would scream in those halls, only the rats and the cold stone kept her company. For 3 long years, Elizabeth Báthory survived in this tomb-like captivity, slipping further into madness and memory. Then one August night in 1614, silence. The guards checked on the 54-year-old countess and found her lying cold on the floor. The Blood Countess was dead. Her dark reign had ended. But her legend was just beginning to spread. Elizabeth Báthory's story did not end with her death. In many ways, it only grew larger. The shocking tale of a vampiric countess bathing in blood was too sensational for history to forget. In the centuries after 1614, Bathory's crimes became the stuff of myth and folklore. Local stories about the countess were passed down, and in 1729, a Jesuit scholar named Laszlo Turoczi published the first detailed account of her deeds, painting her as monstrously evil and helping to cement her gruesome reputation. Over time, the rumors snowballed. It was in these retellings that Bathory's body count ballooned to the infamous number of 600 or even 650 victims, making her the most prolific female serial killer in recorded history. The lurid image of a countess bathing in virgin blood to retain youth took on a life of its own, earning Elizabeth Báthory nicknames like the Blood Countess and even comparisons to vampires and Dracula. In fact, her bloodthirsty activities led many to cite her as one of the first vampires in history. Her tale has inspired countless books, films, and even video games, an enduring Gothic legend that continues to captivate and terrify. But here's the twist in the tale. Was everything about Elizabeth Báthory's legend true? Modern research suggests a more complicated story. While there is no doubt that young women died under her care, some historians now question the scale and nature of her crimes. The idea that she killed 600 or more girls might be an exaggeration. It could be that some testimonies were coerced or embellished amidst the hysteria. It's also possible that Bathory's enemies inflated the accusations to destroy her. Remember King Matthias II, who ordered her investigation? He owed a huge debt to the countess, money he had borrowed from her late husband's estate. Conveniently, after Elizabeth was imprisoned, the king never had to repay that debt. Her relatives too had much to gain. Elizabeth was immensely wealthy, and once she was out of the picture, her family readily divided up her lands and wealth. These facts have led some scholars to argue that Bathory may have been the victim of a conspiracy, framed and silenced so that powerful men could seize her fortunes. In this interpretation, the Blood Countess becomes a case of l'humain woman as monster propaganda, a powerful woman smeared to eliminate a political threat. On the other hand, the contemporary evidence of cruelty is hard to ignore. Dozens of eyewitness accounts from 1610 to 1611 describe battered bodies of girls and the discovery of victims at the castle. The sheer consistency of the testimonies, servants and locals recounting torture, suggests that something horrific truly occurred at Choctaw. It's likely that the truth lies somewhere in between. Perhaps Bathory did commit terrible crimes, but later storytellers exaggerated details, like the bloodbaths, to craft a more sensational legend. We may never know exactly where reality ends and myth begins in Elizabeth Báthory's case, and perhaps that uncertainty only adds to her dark allure. What we do know is that Elizabeth Báthory has secured her place in history as an icon of evil. She is often remembered alongside the likes of Vlad Dracula Tepes as a figure who blurs the line between human cruelty and supernatural horror. Sociologists and historians have noted that we have many male representations of spectacular evil throughout history, but few infamous female villains. And Bathory uniquely fills that void. Her story resonates because it forces us to confront difficult questions. How could a person commit such atrocities? Was she a product of a violent era or a true psychopath? And how could her status shield her for so long? It also highlights how legends are born. from a mix of truth, fear, and fascination. 400 years later, the Blood Countess remains an object of morbid fascination, a mirror reflecting both the horrors humans can inflict and our enduring fascination with the macabre. In the end, whether Elizabeth Báthory truly bathed in blood or not, her name has become immortal in infamy. The Blood Countess stands as a warning from history, a tale of unchecked power, unimaginable cruelty, and perhaps the power of gossip and superstition to transform reality into legend. Her story forces us to consider where the truth ends and the dark fairy tale begins. Was she the most prolific female serial killer of all time, or the target of one of history's most elaborate frame-ups? The debate continues, but the grisly legacy of Elizabeth Báthory is undeniable. One thing is certain: her dark legend has stood the test of time, continuing to send shivers down our spines. And as long as people are drawn to the mysteries of the past, the Blood Countess's shadow will loom large in our imaginations. A figure of nightmares from a world long gone, yet never truly forgotten. Thank you for joining us in this journey into darkness. If you found this story intriguing, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more mysterious and chilling histories. Have thoughts on Elizabeth Báthory's guilt or innocence? Comment below. We'd love to hear your theories. And if you're craving more dark history, be sure to watch our next episode. Until next time, stay curious and stay spooky.